Press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update from Sebastian Fitness Solutions.
In today's video, I'm going to be talking about a very dreaded fear that we all have as training enthusiasts. And that fear is the fear of an injury. What is up, everybody? This is Sebastian from Sebastian Fitness Solutions. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about a very dreaded fear that we all have as training enthusiasts. And that fear is the fear of an injury. More specifically, I'm talking about the most common area that we all could possibly get injured. And what is that? That is the shoulders. Now, the shoulder happens to be the most common area where we could get injured, and for good reason. And that is because it happens to be the most mobile joint in the human body, with its possibility of moving in all possible directions, whether it's flexion and extension, whether it's abduction and adduction, whether it's rotation either outside or inside, and then another thing called as circumduction, which is essentially just doing shoulder circles, So moves in all possible directions, and therefore it's the most mobile. Now, one property about joints is that greater the mobility, lesser its stability. So given the fact that the shoulder happens to be the most mobile joint in the body, it also becomes the least stable. And hence it is more predisposed towards suffering, minor strains, to injuries, tears, and also dislocations. Now, it's bad enough that the shoulder is predisposed to issues like this, but there are certain training habits that most of us indulge in that make this issue further worse, and makes it even more likely for the shoulders to get injured. And this is something that we can definitely avoid. Although we can't control, the shoulder being just in general inherently susceptible to injury, we can control these training, habits or errors, which can make it even worse or make it even more possible for that shoulder to get injured. So going into that a little bit, why would that happen in the first place? What are these training habits? Well, to understand that, let me preface a little bit and discuss about the muscles that are involved around the shoulder. When you see the muscles around the shoulder, they are divided into two main categories or two main groups. The first being the deltoid group, which contains three muscles, namely the front deltoid or the anterior head, the middle deltoid or the lateral head, and the rear deltoid or the posterior head. And these are superficial muscles. And then the second group is the rotator cuff group, which is a bunch of tiny muscles that lie within, and they're primarily working as stabilizers to keep the shoulder in place. Now, if you think of the deltoid group, they are primarily movement facilitators. So they move the shoulders across its key movements, like say shoulder flexion, which is the job of the front delt, or shoulder abduction, which is the job of the lateral delt, or shoulder horizontal abduction, which is the job of the rear delt. On the other hand, you've got the rotator cuff group, whose primary function is to keep the shoulder girdle in place, to keep it stable, to stabilize the arm in the shoulder socket and not let it move here and there while you're performing your different movements. That is the primary function. Along with this, the rotator cuff group also assists or performs movements of rotation, whether it's external rotation or internal rotation. And that's pretty much the roles that these two muscle groups have. Now, when you think of the kind of training that we do on a regular basis, most exercises in the weight room, you'll think about this, that most people hammer away on their deltoid muscles. You've got overhead presses, you've got front raises, you've got side lateral raises, you've got rear flies. They pretty much hammer their delts. And of course, you've got all pushing and pulling movements in which the delts again get worked. So a significant amount of work and volume is devoted to the deltoid group. On the other hand though, can you think of the last time you saw somebody training the rotator cuff group exclusively? Think about it, or rather directly. I would assume that isn't really something that you've seen. And that's just the case in general because not many people are aware of this. And very, very, very few people even know of this, let alone to train the rotator cuff group separately. So what happens in this case, pretty much is that over time, you're looking at a muscle group, a huge muscle group of the deltoid, which is responsible for creating movements that keeps getting stronger and stronger because you progress in it. And then you've got this tiny little muscle group within, which is responsible for stabilizing this joint, which is starting to get bigger and stronger, handling bigger and bigger weight, but it's not gaining size and strength, or rather strength specifically, proportionally. And what happens is over time, this difference starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where it becomes too much. And how much can this little rotator cuff group, handle or balance if it's, it's just the way it is, and the deltoid keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger. I hope you can see what I'm talking about here, because it's kind of becomes more obvious when you think about it that way, right? So that's pretty much, when you see something like that, when you've got the deltoid getting stronger and stronger, the rotator cuff group not so much, this imbalance that you see between the two makes it very likely that, the joint or can suffer issues like quick sprain here and there, or a quick tear when it's handling certain kind of a resistance or a certain kind of force exertion, where it's really challenging itself, where the outside muscle could just do its job, but then that stability that's needed to do the same just doesn't, match up to that. So now that we understand one of the possible causes for this, what is the solution? And the first and most important solution that I would recommend that you implement is to switch out as many of your existing exercises that are supported, aka using on machines, to unsupported movements. Now the reason I'm saying this is because when you bring about supported movements like machine rows or machine presses or a lot of machine work, you've got the machine doing a lot of the stabilization for you. And this kind of prevents, or rather reduces, the requirement of your rotator cuff group to kind of stabilize for you, and therefore they don't get to do their job and then proportionally increase in strength as you get stronger. So if you can push 100 pounds on a machine, your pectorals and your delts and everything are getting stronger, but the rotator cuff group not so much, because it's not challenged that way. That's one key thing you got to change. Another thing that would benefit you a lot is if you switched out your bilateral movements with isolateral or unilateral movements. What I mean by that is bilateral mostly are barbell movements, or movements that you're working both sides or both arms or both legs on a single resistance. Whereas isolateral is working both sides separately on two different resistances, and unilateral being working one side at a time with its own independent resistance. Now the reason why this helps is because a lot of bilateral movements may require stability as long as they are unsupported in one direction, but then they kind of miss out on the other. For example, if you think of a bench press, you've got the barbell in front of you. Now you have to stabilize it kind of, from moving top and bottom. But you don't have to stabilize it side to side because it's one bar. It doesn't have to be stabilized from one arm to the other. And that is something that would be required in the case of a dumbbell press, because now each side is handling its own resistance, and the dumbbells could very well easily cave in or cave out, because of which you've got to keep that shoulder nice and tight. And it has to be in that position with your shoulder being nice and stable as you descend with the weight, so that the weight doesn't fall here or there. And that's when it challenges the rotator cuff group more than it would challenge, in a barbell movement. So there you go, you can make those switches. So if you switch out your unsupported movements with supported ones and switch out most of your barbell movements with dumbbells, then you would see a big difference there in terms of the stability requirements, and therefore you'd see your rotator cuff doing what it's supposed to do and getting proportionally stronger. The second thing that you can implement is to directly train the rotator cuff group, especially in external rotation. Now, like I mentioned, nobody really does that. Nobody really trains their rotator cuff group directly. And that's one of the main causes why there's a lot of imbalances, postural issues, weakness that can happen in the shoulder joint. To compensate or to kind of make up for the volume of training that you do for your larger muscles, you've got to kind of get some kind of volume for the rotator cuff group as well, just so they can get stronger in those tiny little functions that it's got to be good at. And doing so is an investment that you can make, so that you make sure that your rotator cuff group is kind of at least somewhat staying on par with the progressions that your deltoid group is also going through. And that's about it. It comes down to just that. You've got your shoulder joint, which is just the way it is. It's just going to have a huge potential, or rather just more likely than other muscles or other joints to get injured. But and freak injury is something that you can't really control. However, if you are in a position where the worst thing or the last thing that you want is an avoidable injury to happen just because you weren't really cautious about your training or didn't plan that out well. So I really hope that you will use this information and use this quick little, suggestion and tip in adjusting your training and to modify it just to make sure that you've got all your bases covered, and so that you can allow the shoulders to get strong in a complete point of view and therefore resist any possible injury or dislocation or something serious like that, which could really affect you. I really hope you found this video informative, and if you did, give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, what are you waiting for? Click that subscribe button right now and share this video with anybody if you find that will find this helpful and can incorporate this into their training as well and avoid any similar issues. And that's about it, guys. That's all I have for you today. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing.
Hey, thank you for watching that video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And finally, to watch another video, click right over here.